All right, everybody. Welcome to the Surplus Store and Recycling Center January Town Hall. Thank you all so much for coming and joining us today. My name is Katie Deska and I'm the Education Coordinator. Oh, Dave, unmute yourself. Go ahead. Thanks.
My name is Dave Smith. I oversee the recycling and surplus collections here on campus.
And my name is Chris Hewitt. I'm an operations coordinator for the Surplus Store and Recycling Center.
Hi, Marge. I see you turned on your camera. Nice to see you. Anyone else, if you're interested, go ahead and turn on your camera. For anyone who came in just in the last minute, we are recording this and going live on Facebook. So just a heads up on that. But hi, Jackie. Also, thanks for joining on video. Nice to see you. All right, so we're going to get started today. We're talking about zero waste habits. And before we get into any sort of specifics, we just wanted to take a minute to kind of draw a picture for where we're at. So I'm going to share my screen and pull up a link to a web page that we started working on to just kind of talk about this a little bit more in depth, because it is, you know, an issue that goes beyond simply switching out disposables for reusables. There's a lot of factors that go into starting to live more zero waste. And I'm sure there's a lot of people on here who have experience cutting down their waste drastically, and others who might be just kind of starting out thinking about it. So we hope that we can talk about things that are applicable to both ends of the spectrum there. Oops, Chris, now that you're the host, can you enable sharing screen for me, please?
Yeah, you should be all set.
Cool, thanks. All right. Hi, Megan, nice to see you. And Vicky says she'll come on in a minute when she's finished with her dinner. Awesome. All right, so you should be able to see this web page that I pulled up right here. So we're going to post this later, but we first wanted to start off talking about the magnitude of the issue that we're dealing with in terms of how much waste we generate. And for the purposes of today, we're just looking at the state of Michigan. And so in 2019, Michiganders in our municipal solid waste, which includes the residential waste and commercial waste, we landfilled 56 million cubic yards. And that is on top of, or not including the waste that would be brought to us from, say, Canada or out of state. A big chunk of our waste comes from Canada. About 17% of our landfilled waste comes from Canada. And in 2019, we landfilled 8% more than we did in 2018. So you can see the increase here from 2013 to 2019, where we've been going. This is all in cubic yards. We typically work in pounds. And so we broke this down into what it is for each Michigan resident. And if you were to divvy that up by our population, it's an estimated 3,000 pounds that each individual was responsible for. So that'd be, you know, including things that come out of your household and things from like the commercial industry, including retail or restaurants, businesses, that sort of thing. So we're on a backward trajectory here. But another thing to keep in mind is that this issue is beyond just landfilled waste. So sometimes people feel like there's an issue of landfill space and that we're going to fill up all the landfill, and that's why we should stop you know, producing waste. Well, definitely we don't want to be filling our land with trash. There's far better uses for it. There's also the concern of greenhouse gas emissions and the methane that's produced from landfill specifically. So in 2006, this data come from the EPA, so it's outdated, it's old, but it's still relevant. In 2006, 42% of all US greenhouse gas emissions were related to the provision of domestically produced goods, goods and food, which includes things like our packaging, extraction, production, transportation, and disposal of the items. So that's what this graph here shows. And this yellow gold portion here shows that 42%. So those are greenhouse gas emissions that are related to things that we consume. So I think the main purpose of this is just to see that we have a opportunity to make a big dent in some of the greenhouse gas emissions. So yes, this is a consumer concern and an individual issue, but it's definitely beyond that, right? So we know that corporate responsibility is a major piece of the puzzle. And I think it's important that we just recognize that we're working in a system that's kind of fighting against the concept of zero waste. The way that it's described is the make, take, waste model. We make something, we will purchase it, or we take, I should say, we take make waste, right? So we take resources, we produce something, and then we'll throw it away. So that's the basis of the linear economy, and that's where we want to move away from. And while the recycling economy is definitely a step in the right direction, recycling as a alternative to landfilling, but what's more important is that we practice that circular economy, try to keep things more in use in their actual form as they are. So just reusing goods as best we can, and not just relying on recycling. The other thing that I think is interesting is just the fact that we're in modern consumer society, and there was a research study that was looking in at green lifestyle changes, and some of the research was drawing back to the history of how we got to modern consumer society. And it talked about here, the quote is, "The arrival of consumerism in Western Europe involved truly revolutionary change in the way goods were sold, in the array of goods available and cherished, and in the goals people define for their daily lives. This last, the redefinition of needs and aspirations, is the core feature of consumerism." And so this is the other piece that I think is important when we consider going and making zero waste lifestyle changes, is that we're kind of living in a world where the way that we see our identity is oftentimes related to how we consume and what we buy and how we kind of present ourselves to the world through our purchases. And so it's just one other layer. And when we talk about zero waste, the thing that I think is really important is that we keep it in mind as a visionary goal. So the Zero Waste International Alliance in 2004 made the definition, they wrote out the definition as zero waste being a goal that is ethical, economical, efficient, and visionary, to guide people in changing their lifestyles and practices to emulate sustainable natural cycles, where all discarded materials are designed to become resources for others to use. And so when we're focusing on it as a visionary goal, we recognize that we're going to be up against challenges and some limitations and some pressures. And some of those will be of just living in consumer society, in Western society, in the US specifically. In the 1980s, Americans were exposed to about 2,000 ads a day, and now we're up to 5,000 commercial messages per day, which is, just mind-boggling. And then I also really liked this quote from another researcher that is seems pretty clear. "The problem is that we do not often see the true ugliness of the consumer economy, and so are not compelled to do much about it. The distance between shopping malls and their associated mines, wells, corporate farms, factories, toxic dumps, and landfills sometimes half a world away, dampens our perceptions that something is fundamentally wrong. And so I think that we can all relate to that fact of just feeling like where we get our materials from and where they go is, this place away that doesn't truly exist. And then speaking of other challenges, logistics, time, finances, access, maybe some health concerns. So there's some limitations that might be out of our control when we want to adopt a zero waste lifestyle. So we just have to be reasonable. And I think that's the main thing, is to maintain that compassion and empathy with ourselves and others as we try to make these changes, because, there's whole fields of psychology dedicated to behavior change. So this is not necessarily an easy thing to do. And at the end of the day, moving into a zero waste lifestyle is about making behavior changes. It's about changing your habits and changing some of those things that we just kind of do out of default. And so, once we kind of position ourselves in that, then we can start to make decisions based on the zero waste hierarchy. So the things that we learn when we're younger: reduce, reuse, recycle, that they're in an order for a reason. And it's kind of like those decision-making matrix that you've seen in other maybe magazines, where, if I want to buy if I say I need a new jacket, okay, so I need a new jacket. Am I going to buy the new jacket, or am I going to look for a secondhand jacket? If I'm willing to look for a secondhand jacket, okay, so then I can go down that pathway. Or if I'm not willing to buy a secondhand jacket, maybe I will consider the other pathway. And then can I look for one that has recycled content, that's made of recycled bottles, or or recycled, I've seen usually they're out of that plastic. And so you can kind of take it down the hierarchy, both in your decisions when you're purchasing something and when you're discarding something. So I think the hierarchy should come into play with both the decisions on the front end before you consume something and on the back end. So I think most people are probably familiar, but basically just starting at the top, rethinking our relationship in general to our things and what's important, maintaining our values, and then focusing on refusing and reducing, particularly with single-use items, and then practicing reuse where we can, both in the conventional sense, using an item for the same purpose over and over again, or in a creative way, upcycling it, and then moving on to recycling and composting or rot for the remains, and then using landfill as a last resort. So when we set out for our zero waste journey, we might want to start with a clear, simple goal, something that is within your reach, and make sure that you're very clear on what it is that you're trying to change or maintain. And I think there's a few guidelines that are talked about regularly, are probably familiar. Just the idea of using what you have first before you go on and were to purchase anything new. It's tempting maybe to buy reusable, silicone bags or something like that, or beeswax wraps, but let's use up what we have first, and then simplify, considering what you can go without, making sure we plan in advance before we leave the house. It's different right now in COVID times, but it's still good to have your water bottle with you in that. Think about your purchases well in advance, so you can avoid that impulse shopping, and then maintaining a good functioning recycling station at home. I think I'm very guilty of having my stuff overflow, and it makes it really hard sometimes. And then there's just a few ideas for bathroom and kitchen. And we're going to put this link out to you guys as well. And so that's kind of the kind of context. And then we just wanted to talk about a few specifics that we do in our personal lives. So to focus on reducing trash and recycling, one of the first things that you want to do is take a peek into your garbage can or your recycling bin. You could do a formal waste audit where you collect weights and, mark the date and divvy up your material that way, so you have a good baseline. Or you can just simply look at your materials and see what are some items that you could potentially omit from your stream. So in looking at mine, I found that I go through a lot of cereal and granola. So that's one that I am willing to work on omitting. So going and purchasing just oats in bulk and making a granola and baking it at home is one way that I can, reduce this white waste from my stream. Another one is like, salty snacks. These are pretzels, but we also like buy chips in that. So trying to move into something less wasteful like this popcorn. So I can make this and I can still get that kind of salty snack, but I don't have the plastic bag packaging that is just a landfill item. And a lot of times you can find the kernels in bulk too at certain stores. And then, some things I'm not going to be ready to omit yet. It's winter in Michigan, so I love my citrus. So I've been buying these little clementines a lot, and sometimes you find them outside of packaging, but these are packaged. So I'm going to keep, getting those. Lemons is another one that I find, but again, looking for those individuals where I can. And then there's just some other items in the household that have easy swaps, buying your soap in a big container like this and refilling your containers around the house using a certain type of, baking soda mixture for your scrubbing. And then, instead of disposable razors, swapping to a safety razor with reusable blades or refillable blades. Some items for the bathroom like deodorant, these are also available without the trash packaging. And same with the shaving gel. You can buy that also in a bar that is just in a paper wrapper. So those are a few of my swaps to reduce the trash that I have. And Dave's going to talk next about some of his creative reuse options that he likes to practice. Dave, you're muted still.
Sorry about that. So one of the ways I like to decrease waste is to repurpose materials. That is really to use things that are no longer needed or wanted, and then really turn them into something that's new. An example is this old typewriter table that you can see in the top left picture there. That's something that came from the surplus store. And I got this idea to turn it into a bar cart. So I used some wood also from surplus and kind of turned it into this new functioning piece of furniture. You can find these things like this typewriter table at places like garage sales, thrift shops, and of course, obviously the surplus store. We have lots of furniture, particularly from the university. And with some basic hand tools and a little bit of woodworking knowledge, you can take these broken pieces of furniture, these old worn out pieces, and create something that's new and useful. And it doesn't really take a whole lot to do this. Really, the biggest hurdle is probably having the creativity and imagination to do it. But the nice thing nowadays is you really don't have to be all that creative to be able to do some of these things, because we have so many resources now. Websites like Pinterest is probably one of the best ones out there for coming up with these creative ideas. Etsy is another one, and you can even buy stuff off of Etsy's. Then, of course, there's also even tutorials that you can get nowadays from places like YouTube, which brings me to the second example I have, which is the patio cooler that you see there. That's made from wood from about 3 or 4 wood pallets. You can see the picture of the truck there with all the pallets on it. Here at MSU, we get hundreds of pallets every week or so. And some of them we send back out for reuse. Some of the ones that are in broken condition, we try to utilize the wood from them if we can. And so I was able to use the wood from about 3 or 4 pallets. I had an old Coleman cooler in my garage that I wasn't using, one of those that you take camping or maybe to a tailgating. I think it's like 18 or 20 gallon, and make this kind of cool rustic looking cooler that sits out on my patio, and I can use it for drinks in the summertime. And I saw that idea on YouTube. There's several different examples of both patio coolers and all sorts of things that you can make from pallet wood on both YouTube and Pinterest. And there's lots of benefits of repurposing material. I mean, some of the obvious ones are, it reduces the material going to landfills, but it also prevents the use of a lot of raw materials, because we're simply not making things out of new materials. We're taking what we had and turning them into new things. And that process itself saves both energy and money, which leads to, reduction in greenhouse gas emissions. Another nice benefit of that is it eliminates packaging waste. So if you were to go buy, this patio cooler or the bar cart, this likely would have come from probably somewhere out of state, maybe even out of the country, likely from China, would have gotten shipped across here. It would have been packaged in cardboard, styrofoam, probably plastic wrap, all of those things. And so by repurposing the items that we have easily at hand around here, you're eliminating the packaging waste. And then I think, to me, the biggest benefit, it's a fun and rewarding thing to do. I mean, I've given away 3 or 4 of these patio coolers to my friends that use them, and so it's great to be able to share those resources with friends in the community. So thank you.
Yeah, and then one of the things that I have implemented in my life, the other 2 pictures there, is that I kind of had a default habit of always grabbing paper towel whenever there was the slightest mess or spill in the house or something that needed to be wiped up. And so my wife and I a little while ago were cleaning out some old clothes. We had some old towels, and she came up actually with the idea of upcycling some old towels and some t-shirts that we were no longer wearing because we outgrew them, and making homemade rags and paper towels out of them. And we cut the t-shirts up to match 10 by 10 or 5 by 5 squares with the towels, to then kind of give it a kind of a fun look to it on one side. So this one was one that I made, so it was a Red Wings, and she taught me how to sew the edges together so they don't fray, and it's an absolutely atrocious sewing job, if you can see that closely. But that was something that we did, that we reused something that we had, and these can now just be washed hundreds of times until they eventually start to wear out, and we will probably by then have other cloth that we can use to replace them. Another thing that we have done in our house to lower our waste is much like Dave with the pallets, a couple of years ago, a company down the street from my house had a couple pallets out on the side of the curb, and I got this idea that I wanted to start composting. So I dragged them home and pulled them apart, and like Dave said, that I found some examples online, and I hammered them back together and made a compost bin for the side of my yard. And researching it more, that actually the EPA says that on average, we dispose 209 pounds of food waste every year, and that actually food waste makes up the largest chunk of items that we put in the landfill. It's about 22% by volume of what gets landfill is actually food waste. And by doing this in the backyard, it breaks down, and then we use it in our garden in the spring. So we have kind of fresh, very healthy, rich soil that we're using every year that kind of comes from our food waste. And I originally started by collecting it just in a recycling empty coffee can, but have since also been gifted for Christmas a nice little compost tote to keep in the kitchen, and it stays set pretty tight so you don't get any smells. And then when it gets full, I take it out, turn the compost pile, and you'd be amazed at how quickly food will break down. And this is a very kind of rewarding project that we have implemented. Okay.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing, Dave and Chris, both. So we just wanted to, share some of the things that we like to do, and mostly, hear from you guys about what you like and answer any questions that you have, and just kind of want to have a discussion. So just a reminder to everybody that we are recording this and we are live on Facebook right now, assuming the stream is still connected properly as it should be. It is. Cool. Okay, so we might get some comments as well, Chris, from there. So just to kind of kick it off, if anyone would like to share on how they practice, like the top tier of refusing, reducing your waste, what are some of the things that you like to do for that? And if you want, let me see, if you would like to go ahead and unmute yourself, you're welcome to do that, and just, maybe let us know your name, and then if you would prefer, you're welcome to drop anything in the chat and we can read that out. I see that Anna said here that when Dave was talking about Pinterest and getting ideas, Anna said Instructables is also a great site as well. So yes, agree on that one. So the floor is open if anyone would like to share. Marge, go right ahead.
All right, I've got a couple things. Farmers like egg cartons, farmers with chickens. So I collect egg cartons from friends pretty regularly and get them to friends of mine who have chickens. I used to vermicompost, but I wasn't really good at it. But you guys, vermicompost, are you open to people bringing food to compost there at this point? Or is it something that might be coming in the future?
Right. At this time, we're not able to do that, but it is something that, we hope to get to, but we're not there yet right now.
Okay, but that would be awesome.
Yeah.
Do you sell worms for people who vermicompost?
We have thought about that. We don't sell worms currently. But our worm wizard, or I forget now what he likes to go by, Sean, he did say that there's a good opportunity to find him on actually Craigslist of all places.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So you could check there if you're looking for some.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then another thing I do
Dave,
is,
I was just gonna say, just to add to that, we are exploring the possibility of a bucket for area residents to potentially bring stuff, and we'll vermicompost it. Obviously, with the pandemic, some of those plans have been put on hold, and we did just open the vermicompost facility this fall, so we're still kind of getting our feet wet with it, trying to make sure we have everything up and running the way we want it to. But that is something on our to-do list. In fact, it's part of our strategic plan moving forward over the next couple of years. So hopefully we'll do that. And I wouldn't be surprised too if we do, offer worms or sell worms for those folks who want to vermicompost themselves as well.
cool, thank you.
and Marge, were you going to say something else too?
Yeah, another thing I do is, Amazon.com, I have boxes and boxes. So recently I posted on Facebook, does anyone want these? Yeah, I have a friend who does Marketplace a lot. And so she takes my boxes and reuses them. So it doesn't need to go into, recycle. It's getting used again.
Yeah, that's a great idea. There's so much cardboard going around these days, and definitely not a shortage of boxes for anybody who needs to move.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, or can be creative and make art with that.
Yeah. One more thing is a question. Really, there's two of us and we do trash every other week. And the biggest part of our trash is kitty litter. Is there anything else that can be done with kitty litter besides throwing it away? Used kitty litter.
Anybody have an answer to that? A dog
I'm
person.
not aware of anything.
Okay, well, that's the majority of what we throw out because we try to recycle and compost anything else that we can.
I wonder if there's any alternative to, your standard kitty litter. Like if there's a material that someone's using that is, I'm not sure, maybe breaks down easier, or I don't know.
Okay. Well, the stuff I'm using, actually I change out like once a month and it soaks in, it's like magic, but I don't know if it's a horrible thing to have. So we'll see about that.
Yeah, that's one of those non-negotiables. It sounds like, I buy dog food. That's another one for me, is the dog food I get is like paper bag lined with plastic. So some of it I can kind of pull apart, but some of it you can't. So it's like, everyone's going to have those kind of things that are not going to be really easily to cut out. So, you just do what you can. So yeah, thank you for sharing.
Yep, thanks.
Hello, everyone. My name's Megan Goss, and I live in the Saginaw Bay region of Michigan. Talking about dogs, that was something whenever I got my dog in 2019, that it was a big change in like waste for me. So trying to think about ways that I can reuse. So I have to buy him food. So reusing the dog food bag as my trash bag, and then using duct tape to close it up to make sure it's not overflowing. So that's one way of like just trying to think about reusing. And then going back to your comment earlier, Katie, about cereal, I went without cereal for a very long time on my zero waste journey, and cereal gives me so much joy. So I like with my dog, I realized if I buy the family size boxes of cereal, I can reuse those bags as poop bags as well. So I'm really getting on this reuse, and my dog is helping me so much with it. So it's allowing me to have like the balance of the things I really love that I can't get without having waste, and then I can still figure out a way to reuse it. Another thing I'm starting to explore more is TerraCycling. And I know that wasn't necessarily highlighted, but they have a lot of partnerships with different brands. And I specifically use it a lot with beauty care products. So trying to buy products that have partnerships with TerraCycle, and then you can send the product once you're finished with it to TerraCycle so they can properly dispose of it, because they basically help with recycling difficult to recycle items. And some beauty care companies, they actually pay, this is what I use it the most for, it's like face lotions and stuff like that, but they will actually pay and help cover the costs for shipping it in. So wanted to share that too, in case anyone is on the hunt, because that was something I struggled with for a lot at the start of my zero waste journey.
Thank you for sharing both those, Megan. Yeah, definitely. I think the face products like makeup and cosmetics and that sort of thing as well can be tough to dispose of. So that's a cool opportunity. I know they also, TerraCycle also does one for snack wrappers. So protein bars and like snack bars is one of the things that I also struggle with cutting out. Like I can find recipes to make similar ones, but not, all types and all that stuff. So yeah, it's another option. I also saw that some animal clinics will take like mascara wands for use, I guess with maybe taking like cleaning tiny animals, or I'm not entirely sure. Jackie's nodding her head, it looks like. Yeah.
I've heard that before, and if you Google it, there are specific like organizations that you can collect them and send them in. I've seen it for like oil spills that they've used them for, to clean like ducts and things like that. So I know it's something you can find. I can't remember offhand, but that's definitely definitely a great option. And then I guess for my journey lately, just with COVID and moving and trying to clean up and have a simpler lifestyle, I've been using a lot of Marketplace, which is funny because I've been asking family and friends for their Amazon boxes. So I've been doing that to recycle and send out and just sell clothes and do secondhand and try to think of different ways like rags and dog chew toys. I just knot up and braid old t-shirts for my dog instead of trying to buy stuff too. So just looking at clothing, I think it's a huge waste and something that I'm trying to tackle in 2021.
Very cool. Yeah, that textile waste is a big one. I think a lot of people are in that boat of like, cleaning out their closets or their basement or wherever they store their stuff they don't want, and having to find some place to get to put it. And it's easy and tempting to just take it to Goodwill, but if you can find a particular person who wants it, it's far more likely to to stay in circulation and get used properly. I think one of the things that came up when we were talking about the like zero waste decision hierarchy is like, so we oftentimes think of donating as like a good way to promote reuse, and well, I'm not putting in the landfill, but a lot of times we might donate stuff that really doesn't have any value. So I think one of those good check kind of questions for yourself, for like myself too, to keep in mind is, does this item have any value? Can I sell it? And if I can't sell it, am I really promoting reuse by donating it? Or is it actually going to just be somebody else throwing it away? Am I just kind of like giving myself a feel good? So that just, that made me think of that with what you said, Jackie, and definitely a lot of opportunities to like reuse textiles. I love that idea about the dog toys, because that's another thing that I end up throwing away. I found that last time I looked through my trash. Like, I just had this dog toy. I kept it for 2 years, but you know, at the end, it's still going to be trash.
Yeah, you can braid them. You can do leashes and collars and things like that. I think actually Megan gave me that idea a while ago. And another thing with pets, and I have a dog, and that's opened my eyes up to a lot of reuse, is like shelters will take old blankets and sheets and things like that. Because if you get new ones or they just get wore out, you don't want to throw them away because there's no value to donating them, but shelters will still use them. So that's another great place to put big bulky pieces of textile is shelters.
Yeah, that's a good idea. I did not even think of that. Good. Would anyone else like to share some of the things that they like to do?
Yeah, I've got a couple of things. Because of COVID, the idea of going out and actually choosing groceries on my own has pretty much been nil. So I haven't been able to cut as much of the kitchen waste as I'd like because I am disabled and poor and homebound. So it means that I'm limited in what I can do. But like, I get things from Imperfect Foods. So trying to move my produce out of necessarily the grocery stream and into looking at what they can do and what they can help with. And all their stuff comes pretty much unpackaged and in large cardboard boxes. Now, I'm loath to throw out a good box, so it goes in the basement until somebody needs it. Or I was talking to my mom and she's like, you know, your granddad used to put down either cardboard or newsprint in the garden underneath the dirt, and you put your layer of compost and you let it all break down. So I'm like, well, I guess I know what I'm doing in my garden beds this year. So gardens can actually use the cardboard, and since I'm trying to establish that quite a bit, there's my use there. And a thing I found with like household goods, I'm kind of going to speak to that donating thing. I actually connected like 10 years ago with a local anarchist circle that started a really free market. Bring what you have, take what you need. Nobody has to qualify or anything. They faded away. So when I had the opportunity and a building to do it in, I started it back up again. And I can tell you, no matter how many times I say, please only bring the things that have use for somebody else. Well, I have probably an 8-foot table. The entire underneath of it is stuffed full of things that we call our perfectly imperfects. So if you need junk clothes for gardening or whatnot, that's where you dig. But a lot of it is in bad enough shape that we're just kind of trying to figure out what to do with it because we don't want to throw it away. And we're looking for crafters or whatnot who can use them. But other than that, I mean, we don't have community textile recycling here. It's just kind of a matter of finding somebody who has an interest in, you know, clothes missing pieces and stained and whatnot. But finding that connection with the Buy Nothing group or an anarchist circle or whatever, somebody who's really interested in creating that that free economy and opting out of that cycle, basically of exploitative production. If you think about where our garments come from, it's actually pretty horrific. Can be a really great way to cycle things through a house. So like I went and I cleaned out my craft stash, and probably about 11 bins of fabric went over to be passed on to other crafters, and a bunch of clothes and household items, you name it. If it's got use, somebody will pick it up. And the neat thing is where I live, we're all pretty low resource folks. So you get to actually, if you're there on a day and you're running it or you're just helping out, you see somebody come in who wants what you had, and you get to actually not only participate in the giving and moving of stuff, but in the community building of talking to a neighbor who is so excited about that thing you just didn't want anymore in your house. So it kind of serves multiple purposes. But finding that way to pass it on, I found to be really valuable, both from an ecological standpoint and from a community development standpoint too.
Thanks so much, Anna, for sharing. Yeah, I think, you know, you make a really good point about how we do kind of lose, we're not only, you know, just generating excess waste and all this, but we're losing that sense of community too. When we are constantly just relying on ourselves and on, you know, purchasing something new instead of, you know, seeing if someone can borrow it, if you can borrow it from somebody, or, you know, you get asked one of your friends or your family to help you, you know, repair something to sew, you know, like how Chris learned how to sew from his wife. Like, yeah, those pieces are another tier of that. It's nice that you brought that up. Thank you.
I just realized sitting here, this is actually an added on piece of my sleeve that right to what you're talking about. Added on and learned to crochet a circle so that I could lengthen the sleeves.
Nice. I always put a short in mine. Anybody else like to share any?
So just to add on to what Anna was talking about cardboard, cardboard boxes are great for the paths in your garden. Or if you want to start a new garden someplace, you can lay the cardboard down and then it'll kill all the weeds before you till it up or dig it up. And I lay rocks on top of my cardboard to hold it down. But once it rains, the cardboard kind of becomes solidified into your dirt and it stays there. Some other things that I do too, that Katie, that you mentioned about those lemon bags and those orange bags, I reuse those. I cut off that piece of paper that's on the top and it's a nice bag and you can reuse them for so many things. I reuse them when I go to the grocery store to put produce in them, so I don't use plastic bags while I'm at the grocery store. That works really good. Boy, it just works. A lot of things you can reuse those for many things. I'm really into reusing a lot of the stuff that our food comes in. So much of my food, I'm only eat plant-based, and a lot of my food that I get comes in a Ziploc baggie. So I don't purchase any bags anymore. I just I wash those and reuse them, and there were some pretty hefty Ziploc baggies, and it's been years. I don't buy baggies anymore. I make my own toothpaste, and I use the salt blocks for deodorant. I've had this last salt block for, I think I'm going on a year and a half, and the thing, so you know, you don't have to keep buying deodorant on a regular basis. I've decided to not buy cosmetics anymore. I figure men don't wear anything on their face. Why should I? That cut back on a lot of waste right there. I use bar shampoo, and I don't use any conditioner at all. I make my own laundry soap and my own all-purpose cleaners. I buy dish soap that's in the beeswax tubes. And then I keep the beeswax tubes, and I'm collecting a bunch of them, and I'm going to try to make something out of that. I don't use any paper towels anymore. I cut up old t-shirts and things, and I don't do any sewing. I just cut them up, all different sizes, throw them in a basket on my kitchen table. And then I'll rewash those. If they're really gross, I'll throw them away, but I pretty much rewash them. I don't eat any meat or anything. So my trash, it takes about a month and a half to fill up my trash bag in my kitchen, but everything in the house goes in there. And I use biodegradable trash bags too. What else? Oh, and you know, the Swiffer sweeper. So I had one of the sweepers, and then I cut up old material like sweatpants and sweatshirts work really good for that. And you can just use those instead of purchasing the Swiffer sweeper pads or whatever those are. You just use that and squirt your all-purpose cleaner on there. What else do I do? Oh boy.
I'm wondering, Vicky, you've made a lot of changes, it sounds like. So have you done that over the course of years? So like, you know, did you kind of run into some roadblocks along the way where you were doing less of it at some point? You know, if you could just maybe say a couple words about that.
Yeah, you know, I started with one thing, you know, and then I just kind of built on it. Once I mastered one thing, I had tackled something else, and you just kind of keep adding it and pretty soon you realize that you're really doing a lot of things, to reduce waste. I compost as well. I even take my kitchen, some certain food scraps, and I put them in a Ziploc baggie in my freezer. And then that I make vegetable broth with, so I'm not buying, because I was buying vegetable broth and it came in a container and I'm like, why am I doing that? I've got all this compost. I should have taken my onion scraps and my carrot scraps and my celery scraps and mushrooms and the herb stems, and I throw them all in a bag and I make my own veggie broth that way. So it's just kind of noticing as you go through life, how can I change this and not create all this waste? When we had dogs, my husband and I started to make our own dog food even to avoid all that. They're gone now, so I don't have to do that because that was kind of a lot of work, but that was for health reasons too for them. But it's pick one thing, and once you get that out of the way, then try something else and you build on it.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing. Yeah. It's great to hear from someone who's, made those incremental changes over time, and you kind of just be patient and stick with it. And that seems like the way to go. It's what it sounds like. I'm seeing some things come through the chat here, so I want to make sure that those get read out as well. Keen said that detergent strips, they come in recyclable paper packaging, and they are available online, and they can replace those large plastic laundry detergent bottles. So that's another option to get that plastic out. Vicki, also, yeah, you said that sand in place of kitty litter is an option. Megan loved the lasagna gardening. Ronnie said that the cat litter option might be to use pine pellets that breaks down. They've not used this, but they gave a link. And then Rich said that H&M in Meridian Mall says that they offer clothing recycling. So that's something to check into if you are interested. And Alexa talked about the mesh citrus bags being perfect for mushroom hunting. I never even thought to use those for produce bags. It's such a good idea. Linda said that we put cardboard squares between the rows of our garden this summer, and it worked great. We are hoping that they will decompose enough so we can use them this spring. Oh, till them up this coming spring. And then Anna talked about her granddad always tilled just under his cardboard bits there. Sometimes we'd find a few chunks in the dirt, but it never was a problem for the gardens. It helped the clay soil to loosen and hold moisture. So good comments from everybody. Thank you. Anybody else like to share something that they do regularly, or that maybe it's a goal that you're working towards?
Yeah, I've got something that's an observation, maybe a slight silver lining from this pandemic, is that we've really had to buckle down. And I know one thing I don't do is that I don't go to the store nearly as often. I don't zip to Meijer or the hardware store to grab stuff. Now I really plan my trips every couple of weeks, or I order it and pick it up. And so I think it's just that mentality of we can do without some of the stuff that we thought we couldn't before this pandemic. And so I really hope that carries over. Obviously we've seen, there's been a lot of reports about the environmental benefits of the pandemic, less driving, less emissions, those kind of things. And hopefully that we can remember some of these lessons that we've learned that we can do without a little bit, and continue that once things hopefully get back to normal.
Yeah, I agree with that sentiment for sure, Dave. One of the things that I've been doing since, I'm kind of going back and forth between getting my groceries delivered and going out to the store. But when I do get them delivered, they oftentimes come in those plastic bags. And so I've just started to keep those and using them as trash bags now, and, working through my supply. But again, so it's one of those concessions, for the time being. And, one of my other things that I realized in my waste stream is still coffee cups, but right now it's one of the few things I can, have a reason to go interact with the person. So, you know, I'm also not going to give that up right at the moment, but you know, it'd be nice to get that reusable going again.
Yeah, Katie, you mentioned the plastic grocery bags, and I just want to bring this up because it's one of the #1 questions that we get at MSU. You know, where can we recycle plastic bags, plastic film? We do not accept it at MSU anymore. We used to at one point, but Kroger is a really good option for taking those types of bags. Kroger takes more than just their bags. If you go to their website and check, they take things like the cereal bags. They take the bags that newspaper comes in, some of those other things. So it's a good option for recycling what we call plastic film.
I posted a link to the Kroger, what they take in the chat.
Excellent. Thanks, Marge.
I wanted to say old t-shirts make good grocery bags too. You can turn those into cloth grocery bags. The other thing too, you know how people can't recycle pizza boxes because it has the food stains on them. I take a scissors and I cut out the food stain part, and it ends up being a pretty small part, and the majority is cardboard that I can then recycle instead of throw it in the garbage.
Yeah. Hey, Vicky, I actually have an update for you on that. You can actually recycle pizza boxes. One of the leading companies of cardboard recyclers about 6 months ago came out with a report, and they did a bunch of studies, and it is perfectly fine and acceptable to recycle pizza boxes, even if they have food stains. You should remove, you know, if there's any food left in it, if there's, you know, cheese baked on there, or, you know, maybe a slice of pepperoni, that should be removed. But the grease part does not impact the quality of the recycled cardboard. So I always tell people still check with their local recycler, but that is something that's becoming much more common practice.
That's good news. Thank you.
Mhm.
Couple more-
Katie, one thing I started doing during COVID, and it was a way of reducing waste. I guess it was pre-COVID I signed up for it, but it was during COVID it started to be implemented. But it was my first year of subscribing to a community-supported agriculture plan. So every couple of weeks I would get my share of veggie products, and it was really great because I would go to the farm, pick it up, and then it wasn't packaged at all. So that was another way, just thinking about farmers markets and local places of buying food and produce. I know right now in Michigan, it's not really accessible, but come springtime, that's another great way to reduce. And then I know, Vicky, you mentioned the t-shirt bags. I do that as well. And then you can take the sleeves and use those as paper towels. So I'm loving all these paper towel ideas.
I was going to mention CSAs too. I'm a member, and it was our first year doing it as well, but would also recommend like local meat shares too from your farmers. They can often come in much less packaging and then just reduce greenhouse gas emissions as well. And something I've been trying to work on, we just moved into a new house in the fall, and we've got like projects and stuff, and I want to buy all these tools, you know, but they're pretty specialty tools that you only use occasionally. And so I've been trying to rely on friends where I can borrow things like drills or sanding equipment and stuff like that, so I don't have to go purchase it myself, which also saves me money too. But and then I would echo what I think Anna and a couple of other people said was those no, you know, buy nothing groups. I have considered asking folks to maybe borrow things in there as well, but I would just recommend you finding your regional group. They tend to be like regional or whatever. So there's like I'm from the Northeast region, so there's an Alpena free group that I became a member of recently, and hoping to maybe get some stuff from there and give some things away. So that's all I've got.
Yeah, that's a great idea to keep sharing those bigger items that you would purchase, like those tools that you wouldn't use very often. One of the things that comes to mind too is the library, the cattle Lansing area. We now have the special tool or like sewing machines, certain, like I think cameras. So some of those I don't know, they just have a variety of items that are for use for borrowing too. So that's another option. I see.
There's a neighborhood, I'm sorry, there's a neighborhood here in Lansing, the West Side neighborhood has a borrow tool, a gardening tool thing. So check maybe if you have a neighborhood situation where people do that, or start one.
Yeah, the tool lending library. I like that idea. And like you said, Marge, you can always start something like that. I mean, it sounds like Anna, you kind of did that with the free store that you talked about, and I'm sure there's other people on the call here today who've started their own, business or things that they've wanted to see come to fruition. Sometimes you just have to be the one to do it. So it's always kind of daunting to think about doing, in my opinion, but it's cool.
Yeah. For those in the Lansing area, Rich just dropped the link for the cattle program, the library of things it's called. You get to rent things for 2 weeks at a time. So it's a very, very cool program for those in the area if they want to take advantage of it. Thank you, Rich.
And speaking of, starting things, I'm not sure if Alexa is still on the line here, but I know I believe she started the refillery in the Lansing area, where you can get some of your items refilled through delivery service. Some shampoo and some conditioner, some household goods, things like that. So we have to kind of see what's available around us. So. Yes, she said in the chat, she put a link in there. She delivers to the greater Lansing area. So, anybody else interested in sharing anything? Otherwise, we can wrap it up. We're at 8 o'clock. Cool. It was a really nice conversation. I'm glad we got to kind of share some things, and we can hopefully have a follow-up, kind of a similar topic, and maybe kind of go in depth in a certain area. Would anybody be interested in hearing about something just focused all on bathroom or just kitchen, or how to handle textiles, or is there any input from anyone in the audience or participants, I guess, who would like to see any topics covered in the future?
Maybe homemade cleaning products.
Okay. Cleaning products. Yeah, that would be a big one.
Textiles would be really great. I think that's something that would be nice to share with others that are starting their journey on zero waste.
Yeah. A lot of people have the clothes for sure. Textiles. Okay. Even like bedding and that.
And I think if thinking about how complex textiles are, because there's so many different layers to it, because even when you're trying to choose alternatives, like thinking about so if you're trying to avoid cotton because of how much water goes into producing cotton, and then if you use synthetics, the plastics shed into the environment. So it's just so complicated. So how do you be a good consumer within all of that?
Yeah, good point. That whole, the consumer side and the discard side. Yeah.
Before we go, Katie, I did want to throw in a plug for our Spartan Upcycle store, which is on our surplus store website. So we sell upcycled items, including that bar cart that I made is on there for sale right now. So if you're interested in upcycled things, you can actually purchase them from the surplus store.
Yes, and here is the link to the bar cart in the chat. And then we, and Dave's also working on, I'm going to put in a plug for Dave's handyman craftsman work. He's making a stand-up desk that is custom. So pretty soon here, we'll put a listing on the upcycle page of surplus for, custom standing desk where you would choose how high you need it to be. And it's a reclaimed wood, really nice top, if you want to talk about it, Dave.
Yeah, it's so it's reclaimed pallet wood, and the top I made in kind of that butcher block style. So it's strips of different color pine. There's red pine and white pine. It looks pretty cool.
Yeah, it's nice. All right, so just kind of to put a button on it, just a few things to keep in mind is to just, stay motivated and know that, here we are, a group of 20 of us who are just in this really close area. So people are doing, making these actions all over the world. So, it feels really difficult. I just watched the story of plastic last night, and, the magnitude of the problem is so huge, but when we all do a little bit that we can, we kind of keep each other going. So just really glad to have the evening with you all. And in the chat is, a few other links, and we will send out the coupon code for the surplus store as a thank you for attending, but let's put it in the chat right now as well. Do you have that in right away, Chris, or I forgot to grab that, so.
I'm putting it in right now.
Okay, awesome. Yeah. And so the fine print with that is gonna come in the email, which you'll get tomorrow, just as a thank you for attending.
So it will not copy and paste over, so I am typing it in by hand quickly. I believe that is correct. All right. That's the code. Yep. It'll be in the email as well.
Okay. Great, thank you. All right, anything else for the good of the whole?
Thank you everyone for coming.
Thanks for
Yeah,
having
thank you
us.
very much.
Thank you all for participating. It was really fun.
Have a good weekend.
You too. Take care.